You're listening to Leverage, the podcast about power, politics, and influence. I'm Kristal Taylor.
And I'm Breon Wells. So everybody, we are back and we are excited. We are bringing the Leverage family to the Black Millennial Convention. This is its second year, and of course we are joined by none other than Cameron Trimble, who is the principal of Precision Strategies. Welcome to the Leverage family.
What's up? Hey, how you doing, man?
We're good. We're good.
Leverage family.
Yep.
Hear everybody out there.
We're looking for, as I told you on this podcast, we try to help these young, budding minds of activists, advocates, communication strategists, political strategists, really find their niche from a strategic lens to be able to, as we use this Justice League term, use their superpower, right, to kind of change this world and make it a better place. And so I wanted to talk to you kind of about your journey. Tell us how you got there, because often we see people's arrival, but we don't understand kind of the journey that was behind there.
Well, first, thank you, Breon. Kristal's your co-host, correct? And
Yep.
Kristal.
Yeah, she's on a panel, now.
Thank you all for having me on your platform. Thank you. Shout out to the Leverage family out there. My journey, that's always a funny question. I'll say this, the abridged version, because I'm the last part of the millennial generation, the oldest millennial. But I like to say that I'm a testament to that. You don't have to figure it out right away and still be successful. I actually started in medical school, a medical path. Like I'm a communication strategist. Started Men of Color Communications, Hippolytus podcast. Been in the comms industry for 13 years now. But I went to school to Howard because they were number 2 in putting blacks in medical school. I met, it's a weird turn of events, but I met Ben Carson when I was a kid. And
Gifted Hands, the book.
It got me. It got me. That was an inspiring book. And so I went all the way up to my second year in medical school. I knew after the first semester, I was like, I don't want to be a doctor. I love school, but I didn't want to be a doctor. It took me about another year and a half to figure that out.
Not mad at you. Organic Chemistry 1 and 2 is what let me know I don't want to do this for a lifestyle. I got the degree, but done.
But in that, my journey started that passion really started probably on the campus of Howard University, because even though I was pre-med and pre-med everything, all my internships were that. I was also very involved in the student government. So I was, we had something called UGSA, the Undergraduate Student Assembly. I was the vice president one year, and I had to take over as president when the president was sick at one point. Served as my freshman class VP in various organizations. And as you know, Howard is a very politically active school. We did sit-ins while I was there. The Million Family March happened. I was one of the student organizers for that. Sat in on the administration building. So I caught the bug early. Learned for some grades, really took in that information both from my professors and all the different people that were able to come through that I was able to just sit in conferences, meetings, that gave talks. I took advantage of all of that. So I saw that activism bug was there, and then also that marketing and comms bug was there, because as part of student government, that's all we had to do is really, we're programming and the voice of the students. So I'm learning how to speak to my peers. I'm learning how to speak to the broader community, because Howard, with homecoming and so many other things, is a national and international brand. That as a student leader, you can have that taught. And what really got me out of what made me be able to quit medical school successfully and have my parents back me, during my
that was a conversation I can imagine.
Yes, beyond that. But it was actually they're extremely supportive. In the summer between my first and second year, a group of my friends and I, we started this company called Move Makers Incorporated, because we threw a few parties and did some stuff on the side. We wanted to formalize it. And this is at the start of all the social media, the start of all internet marketing. I was like, I'll be the online marketing manager, not really knowing what that was. But kind of learning, took one class, and learning some things. And that, we were successful in our first couple years. That job led to being a marketing director. We worked at this restaurant I was in Philadelphia for school, went to Temple. One of the most historic restaurants, Bookbinders, has been around since the 1800s. Every president that has eaten there. I was able to struck up a conversation. It was like, hey, you guys really need to go to the next level with your marketing. The owner was so enamored. He was like, all right, here, come up with my marketing plan. Never had done that before. Googled the mess out of that to figure it out. Put something together in some strategies, and they actually worked. They hired me on full time. that led to, we did some Obama fundraisers when he first kicked off. This is even before he won the nomination. But when he came through Philadelphia, I mean, I caught the bug. So many Howard people I knew on his campaign. Through that, took that Obama for a couple fundraisers. They liked what they saw. They liked the marketing. They're like, oh, why don't you? And some of my friends reached out, and I actually went into a comms position. I was sent to Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Okay.
Started as a field organizer, then got into the comms realm. Left there after Obama won. We actually won Michigan so early, like they shut down the state early that first time. So I hopped around to a couple other offices, and then I'm left with, all right, I've had a couple years of marketing experience, way more guerrilla marketing and comms experience, but I have had some professional wins. And then I grinded and hustled it took me almost a full year, but I set my sights on, hey, I want to learn this and do this in Congress. So I broke into Congress. Mind you, I'm in my late 20s, mid to late 20s at this time. Had to super humble myself to I wasn't willing to take the free internships, which I suggest if you're under 25, just do it.
Absolutely. Although I do believe that we should pay, as a former Hill staffer, and we should try to help subsidize people's ways there.
They're introducing legislation now to make that mandatory.
Absolutely.
Which I'm so happy, because I think that's going to really expand.
Because it impacts people of color even more particularly that are outside of D.C.
That don't have those opportunities. But fortunate enough, I had hustles, working on the side, doing events, bartending, waiting tables, and was able to flip that where I was a communications internship to a fellowship. So I got like $1,000 a month, which is you can't live off of, but it was something. On the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and they didn't have a Twitter platform. They had just started a Facebook. I had just come off of like all these successful guerrilla marketing tactics and ways to have doing that for the last few years. And I had somebody who believed in me and let me run and build their Twitter platform. I came at the right time when they're reforming their website. I had helped build websites. And so even though I came in at the most junior person in the comms world, I was able to get some real work wins within 3 to 5 months. And then Eddie Bernice Johnson, who
now is the chairwoman
of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. I affectionately call her she's like my grandmother in politics. She's jokes with me. Is like, oh, this is one of my grandsons out here in the world. She hired me on, and mind you, she's now actually the oldest. She's the oldest person in the Democratic caucus at this point. So I worked with her about 10 years ago when I started. So she was still already pretty getting up there in age, very late 60s, almost 70. But she understood the wave of needing for a digital communications outside of the traditional space. So when I started, there weren't many digital comms people who had experience in that. So I had a hybrid position that didn't exist. And that was 2010. So then fast forward, I worked my way up to be a communications director, worked for the committee, worked for her personally. I raised my hand every time I could to help anybody in the caucus as we were doing more digital communications, as we were doing more minority communications, made sure I volunteered and I served on the board and was a member of the Congressional Black Association. I just found every opportunity I could to improve my craft, know where I was, really understand that, have an impact. And then I would say lastly, the reason why I'm probably sitting here is I tried to build relationships. And get to know as many people as I could, sit down with people, be helpful when I can, let people know when I can't. But just try to be a stand-up person, and that path kind of moved forward. And I've had some really cool opportunities over the last decade or so to affect various campaigns, to affect various companies, and I'm still constantly learning.
So it's keeping this consistent hustle and grind then about your craft. Let me ask you this then. So you are currently the executive director of the Men of Color in Communications.
Correct.
Talk to us about the importance when we're talking about marginalized communities, when we're talking about, communities of color, communities where they're often disenfranchised. What's the importance in owning the narrative and representation?
I think that's two different things. Owning the narrative, you don't always have to own the narrative, but you need to make sure you're inserting yourself a narrative. I believe in that. Some people, depending on what we're talking about, some narratives, yes, you do need to own them. Mm-hmm. But representation is key. And
correct.
I think that's where Men of Color in Communications, we affectionately call it MCC. One of the main reasons and the impetus for us to start MCC was that you need to have, we're they like to say we're a majority minority country. We're already there. Mm-hmm. You've heard 2025, 2030, we're there. We're at minorities. If you add us all up in this group, we're the majority in this country. And with the internet and how the World Wide Web has kind of flattened the earth and made everybody really reachable, you have to now be not only nationally but globally culturally competent in anything you're saying out here. So everything is communications, everything is marketing. Every time you put up an ad, you're communicating something. Every time you do something on social media, you're communicating. Every time now, with camera phones and everything being recorded, any executive or employee, if they're going to speak anywhere, they're communicating something. They're communicating something about their brand. Now, as companies, as everybody from companies to campaigns to advocacy groups, it is so important that they all have representation.
Right.
In being a black man, so I'm definitely looking for black representation. But MCC, we focus on black men, Asian Pacific Islanders, and Latinos, because you have to have someone culturally competent at every level, mm-hmm. from the decision makers to the implementer, to decision makers, the managers, down to the people who are implementing. Mm-hmm. Because if people aren't catching, oh, this is insensitive, or this doesn't translate exactly, there's not a one-to-one translation.
Right.
You won't have different things like when you got the Gucci's of the world coming out with certain, like, how many eyes did that get past where you decided it was cool to put blackface on a turtleneck?
Right.
When you see different...
Clearly not enough eyes and not enough diverse backgrounds and experiences.
So having that representation, what we try to work on, and while we were formed, is to ensure that we have men of color in those different representations. We were started and founded out of the ColorCom organization, which is Women of Color Communications. Mm-hmm. The founder there, we actually worked on the Hill together.
Right.
Worked and kept that relationship. And ColorCom has been around now almost close to 9 years with over 1,000 women.
Right.
We've been around for about a year and a half, and we've got a few hundred men between DC and New York in our network so far. But that's the whole goal. Is to try to keep that pipeline flowing, and not just from. We got a lot of entry-level positions. We got a lot of mid-level positions. A manager,
right.
They'll give you a VP, senior VP. We need those people in the C-suite. We need people one or two in the C-suite, one or two, no more than 3 steps removed from the CEO. We need people at that highest level of decision-making, both to be there with those large strategy and that planning, but then they need their managers. They need people who are culturally competent, who are out here directing the work and putting actually the plans together. Then you need those entry level and those early career professionals represented, because they're actually the ones on the ground. They're the ones actually uploading these tweets. They're the ones
right.
actually doing a lot of that groundwork. So that representation is key if you want to have a culturally competent. You really don't want to offend people. Everybody's going to hear your message,
right?
Because your mistakes are magnified in this area.
Mm-hmm. Last question is kind of on the messaging side. So in the 2016 election, there was clearly a messaging problem. Particularly, it would seem on the Democratic
yes.
Absolutely. But there was clearly a messaging problem. It seemed that the message was to millennials, who made up the largest and still now make up the largest voting bloc, to vote the lesser of two evils. I personally believe that maybe the message should have been vote your strategy. But now we're in this space where we're in 2020, and again, we have Donald Trump's record. We have a lot of people that seem to be dissatisfied with that, and we can almost hear the remnants of vote the lesser, though, of two evils. We just got to get Donald Trump out of office. And so my question to you is, in your eyes, how do you see the messaging strategy, and if you disagree with it, what should it be in this 2020
I definitely think what you're saying, vote the lesser of two evils, is a extremely losing strategy. I think something that we got early on, and I'm glad I got into politics under the Obama campaign, because we had a really, from the top down, every day when we would have our meetings and talking about what Obama represented, what his belief was. It's one thing, you can get people out of fear to vote for something, but you're going to get way more people to vote for something, get behind something that they can believe in.
Correct.
So something aspirational and hopeful drives way more than fear. Like, I want to do something that much better, I want to be greater than what I am, is going to drive you even harder than I'm fearful for what may happen. So I think the ultimate messaging strategy and where we have to get to is understanding that you're giving people something to vote for, not just vote against.
Right.
Like, Trump is doing everything he can to let us know and to message to non-supporters, millennials especially, that vote against me. So we're going to get a ton of people who I'm just going to vote against you. But all those people who may not come out to vote, who are on the fence or, hey, I'm not really sold, I really think it's about what are we voting for. So that messaging strategy is about their ideals, is about their plans, is about their authenticity as a candidate and as a person. I think the people who are starting to separate themselves are those who people can understand that that's who they are.
Right.
The Joe Bidens of the world. You got the Pete Buttigieg jumping up here, Elizabeth Warrens, the Bernie Sanders. When you start seeing who's really leading in the polls, people can identify something about them. Yes, all those people are talking about how bad Donald Trump is, and they need to show that sharp contrast. Please continue to show that, and show it in creative ways. But also understand the electorate. We're now all, for lack of a better term, we've dumbed ourselves down a little bit. Like our attention spans, there's so many studies out on how our attention spans have shifted. Where our attention goes, where do we get our news, what are our trusted sources? That's kind of what I deal with all day at work, both on the technical and the science side and the data-driven side, and then also on the creative side of trying to come up with things that do work. But you have to give some people something to hope for, something to aspire to, something to believe in addition to showing the contrast of what they should vote against.
Right. Okay. I feel you on that. Well, thank you very much for taking your time.
Oh, of course.
I know you have a panel upcoming on tomorrow at the convention. What's the title of the panel? What's the subject?
The subject is inserting
Black
millennial voices in the media.
Okay.
And I know we've got the Director of Diversity and Inclusion, I'm forgetting her name right now, of the AP Associated Press, the biggest press organization in the world.
Right.
We actually have one of my mentees. She started Valor to bring young Black millennials together, but she's actually inserted. She's a press assistant on the Capitol Hill.
Okay.
Kayla Primes. That's one of my mentees.
Yeah.
And a few other really good people on the panel. So we'll be talking how do we insert Black millennial voices into the media.
And how can people follow you?
People can follow me. Please follow me everywhere. All of my personal /professional handles are Mr. Cameron Calvin, MrCameron, Calvin CALVIN, and I'm also the co-host of the Hip Politics podcast, which is hip hop and politics, mobilizing the political power of the hip hop community. That's kind of our tagline. So you can find me there, and we put out podcasts about it once every 10 days, about 3 a month, where we're interviewing people in the hip-hop space and the political space, elected officials, and I've co-hosted that with Michael McQuarrie, who's affectionately known as the mayor of Capitol Hill.
Correct.
You can follow us there on everywhere at Hip Politics Podcast. You can find that on Insta and all your social medias.
Well, man, thank you very much for your brilliance and your insight.
I appreciate you for having me. Thank you. Thanks for everyone for listening.
You're listening to Leverage, the podcast about power, politics, and influence. I'm Kristal Taylor.
And I'm Breon Wells.